Hi all, it's Teresa in Gemma's house. Well, if you saw my previous video, I made a simple patchwork bedspread out of a lot of fat quarters that I had collected many years ago. And I just love it so much. I decided to use the rest of my fat quarters to create one more patchwork bedspread. But this one is going to be a little different. Okay, so on the previous patchwork bedspread that I made, they are actually squares. The finished size is 4 3/4 inches. And also, look at the cute pillow shams I was able to make out of all of the remaining fabric that I had already cut for this bedspread. I think they are super cute. They are, of course, one of my new favorites. The other thing I really love about this quilt, the way it turned out, are the deep jewel tone colors. And also the flannel backing. It's also dark. It has beautiful colors in it that match the front of the bedspread. And it just feels so great having a flannel backing. You probably know that too, right? So for this next bedspread, I'm using the information that I got from making the previous one. I ended up having a lot of fabric left over from cutting those fat quarters before because I cut them square, but the fat quarter is 18 by 22 inches and there was always some fabric left over. So I decided to use the entire size of each fat quarter and get as many squares out of it as I can without having any fabric left over from the fat quarter. So that means they're not going to be squares, they're going to be rectangles. And I did the math, and so for an 18 by 22 inch fat quarter, I'm going to cut them 5 1/4 inches by 6 inches. And I won't have any more fabric left from the fat quarters. And I'll need fewer fat quarters. Okay, so after changing my rotary cutter blade to a brand new blade so it's nice and sharp, I am going to cut 5 fat quarters at a time, carefully. And this is the amount of waste I had left from all these fat quarters. So this is a much better use of this fabric. So in my continuous efforts to downsize these days, I looked through my stash and I found I had all these smaller pieces of flannel. And I want to use a flannel backing again. And I can just piece all of these flannel pieces and make a really nice size backing for this new quilt. And it will challenge me to try to use up all of these remnant pieces because I would rather have a bedspread that I can use than have all this fabric just sitting around not doing anything. I just want to use it. Okay, another design decision. I have these blocks cut from all of the fat quarters, and I decided not to use my white on white print fat quarters in this one. I want to stick with more of the blues and turquoisey greens, some of these lighter ones. So I'm looking through my fabric stash and I'll see how many more blocks I can get out of these two fabrics. And I'll look through the rest of my fabric remnants and see what else I would like to include. Okay, so I cut more rectangles than I need for this bedspread because I wanted to have a nice selection while I'm putting the rows together. Okay, so I just went through the process of sewing together all these various pieces of flannel, and I had to square some of them up and I just made wide bands of a couple pieces each. And I wanted to make sure that this backing was the size big enough for the size I want the bedspread to be. And I also had to iron some of the seams down, and then I top stitched some of the seams too to make this backing nice and sturdy. And I think it looks really nice, this combination of patterns and colors. And more importantly, I'm using up a lot of these fabric remnants. Okay, so here's the backing fabric all pieced together, and I have it laying face down. The right side is facing down, and I have it draped over my large table. I'm lucky to have this table to do things like this on. So this backing ended up being 101 inches high and 98 inches wide. So I'm planning on using 17 rows high. That would be the 6-inch cut size, and 20 rows wide, and that would be the 5 1/4 inch cut size. So now I'll start laying out my first row of blocks. And I have my blocks set out here. The light colors, the warm colors and black and whites, the turquoise greens, and the blues. So I can choose from those and lay out my rows in a balanced way. So to watch the complete process of how I made this bedspread, you can watch my video. It's called Easy Assembly Patchwork Bedspread, and I show the whole process there. So I won't be repeating it in this video, but I'll include a link to that video at the end of this video if you'd like to watch that. For this quilt, I'm laying out the rectangle shapes about 1/2 inch away from the edge of the backing fabric, because I'm going to end up cutting this off, and I will sew together some fabric to make a separate binding and then attach the binding onto the edge here. So I always have a good time arranging these squares by different patterns and colors. And when it didn't fit on the table anymore, I laid it on the floor to take pictures so I could admire it even more. Okay, so for this bedspread, unlike the first one I made, I am going to make a new binding, and that will go right along the edge here. So I'm going to cut off the rest of the backing fabric. So after cutting one side of the backing fabric with the rotary cutter and having to shift around the cutting mat and the heavy bedspread so much, I just cut the other 3 sides with scissors, and that went much faster. So here's the back of the bedspread after I trimmed it to size, and here you can see that after trimming it, I went back and top stitched across each rectangle at a 90-degree angle from where the rows had been originally sewn onto the backing fabric. So I sewed the bindings on, and if you would like to watch, I have 2 YouTube videos where I specifically show how I sew bindings onto quilts, and they are these videos here. I'll link them to the end of this video. So after washing and drying this bedspread, it ended up being 90 inches wide by 89 inches high. And that's a perfect size for it to reach all the way down to the bottom of my 13-inch mattress. And this is a queen size mattress. Okay, it's finished. And I'm so happy with the way this bedspread turned out too, in addition to the one I made a couple weeks ago. And I also used the rectangles that I had cut already to make 2 pillow shams, and I think they match pretty well. And I also used my leftover flannel fabric that I'm trying to use up. I put a 22-inch zipper in there, and they're both the same, using up the fabric that I had in a consistent way. And this backing also is so cozy. I actually put this bedspread on top of the last bedspread that I made a couple weeks ago, and it's like having a quilt on the bed. And even though these don't have any batting in them, they were still very nice and cozy warm using two of them. They're nice and light. I can use them for the spring and summer months and still be nice and cozy in the evenings. So I hope this video gives you some ideas of projects you can do in your own home. And if you like this video, can you please give it a thumbs up? And can I also ask you to check my main Gemma's House channel page? If you click on the videos tab, you can scroll around and maybe you'll see another video or two that you'd be interested in watching as well. I do so many other types of projects around my house and yard, in addition to my acrylic paintings. So thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate the viewer support. Bye-bye.